When Whitney Houston walked into Madison Square Garden unannounced that February night, nobody knew she was about to make the most courageous decision of her career. What happened next would forever change how the music industry viewed female artists. But it almost didn't happen at all. The decision that would define Whitney's legacy as more than just a voice, as a leader who put sisterhood before safety, came dangerously close to never being made. If this incredible story of courage meeting compassion moves you, hit that subscribe button and let me know in the comments about a time when you chose courage over comfort. Now back to the night that changed everything. It was February 11th, 1992, and Whitney Houston was sitting in Clive Davis's corner office at Arista Records, staring out at the Manhattan skyline. For the past week, she'd been consumed by a decision that could either elevate her career to new heights or potentially damage the carefully crafted image that had made her America's sweetheart. The entertainment media had been particularly vicious lately, constantly pitting her against Madonna in a rivalry that neither woman had ever wanted or endorsed. "Whitney, I have to ask you one more time," Clive said, his voice carrying the weight of decades in the music business. "Are you absolutely certain about this Madison Square Garden plan? Your image as America's sweetheart is worth millions. Madonna's show is her most controversial yet. If you're seen supporting her publicly—" Whitney turned from the window, her eyes showing a determination that Clive had rarely seen, even during her most challenging recording sessions. "Clive, I've been thinking about this for months. Every interview I do, they ask me about Madonna. Every article written about me mentions her as my rival. Don't you see what's happening? They're making us enemies when we should be allies." But what Whitney was about to reveal would shock even her closest advisor. Whitney had been planning this moment for far longer than anyone realized. She'd been studying Madonna's career, not as competition, but as inspiration. She saw a woman who had fought for creative control, who had challenged industry norms, and who had refused to let anyone else define her artistry. These were battles Whitney understood intimately, even if her approach had been different. "Clive, Madonna is fighting the same battles I fight, just in a different way," Whitney continued, her voice growing stronger. "While I'm fighting to prove that a black woman can be America's sweetheart, she's fighting to prove that a woman can be as provocative and powerful as any man. We're both challenging the industry's limitations on women. Why are we letting them make us enemies?" Clive leaned back in his leather chair, recognizing the passion that had driven Whitney to become the biggest female artist in the world. But he also understood the risks. "Whitney, your gospel roots, your family image, your crossover appeal, all of that could be questioned if you're seen publicly supporting Madonna's most controversial tour." Whitney smiled, the same warm smile that had melted hearts on countless magazine covers. "Maybe it's time to show the world that America's sweetheart can also be America's peacemaker." The plan Whitney had been developing was bold, risky, and completely unprecedented. She would attend Madonna's Madison Square Garden concert unannounced, position herself where she could be seen, and at the right moment, make a public gesture of support that would force the industry to confront its habit of pitting successful women against each other. That's exactly when Whitney revealed the emotional reason behind her decision. Whitney's motivation ran deeper than industry politics. 3 weeks earlier, she'd had lunch with her mother, Sissy Houston, at their favorite restaurant in Newark. Sissy had always been Whitney's moral compass, the woman who kept her grounded in gospel values even as she conquered the pop world. "Baby," Sissy had said, "I've been watching all this nonsense about you and Madonna in the papers. It reminds me of how they used to pit the great gospel singers against each other back in my day. Made us all smaller than we really were." Sissy's words had hit Whitney like a revelation. "What do you mean, Mama?" "When women in our industry spend their time competing instead of collaborating, everybody loses. The music loses. The message loses. The young girls watching us lose. You got a platform, Whitney. You got a voice that reaches millions. What are you going to do with it?" That conversation had planted the seed that was now blooming into Whitney's Madison Square Garden plan. She realized she had an opportunity to use her platform not just to entertain, but to educate, to show the industry and the world that successful women could support each other publicly and powerfully. Whitney spent the next 2 weeks quietly gathering information about Madonna's tour. She studied reviews from the international dates, learned about the set list, and identified the perfect moment to make her appearance. She even had her assistant research Madison Square Garden's VIP box locations, finding one that would be clearly visible from the stage, but partially concealed from most of the audience. You won't believe what Whitney planned to wear to send a message. Whitney's choice of outfit for the evening was as carefully calculated as every other aspect of her plan. She selected a stunning white gown that seemed to glow under lights, a deliberate choice that would make her instantly recognizable to anyone who knew what to look for, while also symbolizing the purity of her intentions. The dress was elegant and sophisticated, a stark contrast to Madonna's provocative stage costumes, but Whitney understood that the contrast was part of the message. She wanted to show that women could support each other across different artistic approaches, different image choices, and different ways of expressing femininity and power. I want people to see that the gospel girl and the material girl can stand together, Whitney told her stylist, who was sworn to secrecy about the evening's true purpose. I want them to understand that there's room for all of us. Whitney also made another decision that surprised her team. She would attend the concert without her usual security detail, with only her assistant Robin Crawford for company. She wanted to send a message that this wasn't a publicity stunt or a business calculation. It was a personal gesture from one artist to another. On the morning of February 14th, Whitney woke up in her Manhattan hotel suite and spent an hour in prayer and meditation. She needed to center herself for what she knew would be one of the most important nights of her career, not for any performance she would give, but for the statement she was about to make. Wait until you see what almost made Whitney change her mind. As Whitney prepared to leave for Madison Square Garden, she received a phone call that nearly derailed her entire plan. Bobby Brown, who had been following the media coverage of the supposed Madonna-Whitney rivalry, was calling from Los Angeles with serious concerns. "Whitney, baby, what is this I'm hearing about you going to Madonna's show tonight?" Bobby's voice was strained with worry. "You know how the press is going to spin this. They're going to say you're trying to ride her controversy for attention." Whitney felt her resolve waver for the first time in weeks. Bobby's concern was valid. The media could easily misinterpret her gesture as a publicity stunt rather than the genuine act of sisterhood she intended it to be. "Bobby, I have to do this," Whitney said softly. "You know how tired I am of them making us enemies. Someone has to take the first step toward changing this narrative. But why does it have to be you? Why do you have to take the risk?" Whitney was quiet for a long moment, looking at her reflection in the hotel mirror. "Because I can. Because I have the platform. Because if I don't, who will?" That conversation crystallized something important for Whitney. She realized that her decision wasn't just about supporting Madonna. It was about using her influence and security in the industry to model a different way for women to relate to each other in entertainment. At 6 p.m., Whitney and Robin arrived at Madison Square Garden through a private entrance, using industry connections that Whitney had carefully cultivated over her 8-year career. She had positioned herself in a premium box that was clearly visible from the stage, but allowed her to control when and how she revealed her presence. But the most heart-stopping moment was yet to come. For the first 90 minutes of Madonna's performance, Whitney sat in quiet admiration, genuinely impressed by what she was witnessing. This wasn't the first time she'd seen Madonna perform, but it was the first time she'd watched with the specific intention of understanding and appreciating Madonna's artistry rather than comparing it to her own. Whitney found herself moved by Madonna's complete command of the stage, her fearless commitment to her artistic vision, in the way she connected with her audience despite, or perhaps because of, the controversial nature of her material. She began to understand that Madonna's provocativeness wasn't about shock value. It was about challenging audiences to think differently about women, sexuality, and power. "She's incredible," Whitney whispered to Robin, her voice filled with genuine admiration. "Look at how she controls that entire arena. She's not just performing, she's making a statement about what a woman can be." Robin, who had been skeptical about the evening's plan, began to understand what Whitney was seeing. "She really is fearless, isn't she?" "That's exactly what I want to honor tonight," Whitney replied. "Her fearlessness and the fact that we can both be powerful in completely different ways." Whitney was waiting for the perfect moment to reveal her presence, and she knew it was coming. Madonna was approaching like a prayer, the song that had sparked international controversy and become a symbol of her willingness to challenge religious and social norms. Whitney had chosen this moment deliberately. She wanted to show support for Madonna during her most controversial piece, making the strongest possible statement about artistic freedom and mutual respect. What Whitney did next shocked everyone in Madison Square Garden. As Madonna reached the emotional crescendo of Like a Prayer, Whitney stood up in her VIP box, her white gown catching the arena lights and making her instantly recognizable to anyone who looked in her direction. The effect was immediate and electric. People in the surrounding boxes began pointing and whispering, and the murmur of recognition began rippling through sections of the crowd. Whitney raised her hands and began clapping along with the music, not hiding her presence, but celebrating it. Her face showed pure joy and admiration as she sang along with Madonna's performance, making it clear that this wasn't a competitive gesture, but a supportive one. Madonna, who was in the middle of her most intense choreography, initially didn't notice the commotion in the VIP section. But her dancers began glancing toward Whitney's box, and eventually Madonna followed their gaze. When she saw Whitney Houston, America's sweetheart, standing and applauding her most controversial song, the shock was visible on her face. For a moment, Madonna almost stumbled in her choreography. She had been prepared for many things during her New York shows, but she had never imagined that Whitney Houston would be in the audience, let alone showing such visible support. Whitney, seeing Madonna's surprise, smiled warmly and gave her a thumbs-up gesture that was both encouraging and respectful. The moment was caught by several photographers in the audience, but more importantly, it was witnessed by thousands of fans who suddenly realized they were seeing something unprecedented. Two of music's supposed rivals showing mutual respect and admiration. You're not prepared for what happened when their eyes met. The connection between Whitney and Madonna in that moment transcended the physical distance between the VIP box and the stage. Madonna, without breaking character or stopping her performance, nodded toward Whitney with what appeared to be both gratitude and amazement. Whitney responded with a gesture that would become legendary. She put her hand over her heart and then pointed toward Madonna, a clear signal of respect from one artist to another. The crowd, realizing what they were witnessing, began cheering even louder. But this wasn't the screaming adoration typically associated with celebrity sightings. This was something deeper, appreciation for a moment of genuine human connection between two women who had been positioned as enemies by an industry that profit from their competition. Whitney remained standing for the rest of Like a Prayer, swaying to the music and singing along, making it clear that her support was genuine and enthusiastic. When the song ended, she blew a kiss toward the stage, a gesture that Madonna caught and returned with a deep bow of respect. But Whitney wasn't finished. As Madonna began her final set, Whitney made a decision that surprised even herself. She asked arena security to escort her backstage, knowing that her presence there would create an even more powerful statement about female solidarity in the music industry, the backstage moment that changed everything. Whitney's arrival backstage during Madonna's final costume change created immediate excitement among the crew and dancers. Word spread quickly that Whitney Houston was in the building and wanted to greet Madonna personally. For Madonna's team, who had spent months defending her against criticism and controversy, seeing America's sweetheart show up to offer support was deeply moving. When Madonna came off stage after her final song, sweaty and exhausted but exhilarated from the performance, she was told that Whitney Houston was waiting to see her. Madonna's initial reaction was disbelief. She simply couldn't process that Whitney had not only attended her show, but had come backstage to meet her personally. Whitney was waiting in a private area away from the main backstage chaos, still wearing her elegant white gown, but now carrying a single white rose that she had somehow acquired during her journey from the VIP box to backstage. When Madonna appeared, still in her final costume but with a vulnerable expression that contrasted sharply with her onstage persona, Whitney stepped forward with warmth that surprised everyone present. "Madonna," Whitney said, her voice carrying that unmistakable warmth that had made her America's sweetheart. "That was one of the most incredible performances I've ever witnessed. I had to come back here and tell you personally." Madonna, who had spent years dealing with criticism and controversy, seemed genuinely moved by Whitney's words. "Whitney, I can't believe you're here. I can't believe you came to my show." "I came because I respect what you do," Whitney replied, offering Madonna the white rose. "I came because I'm tired of them making us enemies when we should be celebrating each other." What Madonna said next brought Whitney to tears. Madonna accepted the rose with hands that were visibly trembling. Whether from exhaustion or emotion, neither woman was sure. "Whitney, you have no idea what this means to me. For months, I've been reading about our supposed rivalry, and I've wanted to reach out to you. But I didn't know if you felt the same way." Whitney smiled, the same radiant smile that had graced countless album covers. "I've been wanting to reach out too. I watch what you do, how you fight for your artistic vision, how you refuse to let anyone else control your narrative. You inspire me, even when our approaches are completely different." Madonna's eyes filled with tears, a remarkable sight for anyone who knew her as the always controlled material girl. "Whitney, your voice, God, your voice is like nothing I've ever heard. Every time I hear you sing, I'm reminded of why I got into music in the first place." The two women embraced, and the photographers present captured a moment that would become one of the most iconic images in music history. Madonna and Whitney Houston, supposedly bitter rivals, holding each other with genuine affection and mutual respect. But Whitney had one more surprise planned. "Madonna, would you consider coming out for an encore? Maybe we could do something together?" Madonna looked stunned. "You want to perform with me? Tonight?" "I want to show everyone out there that women can support each other," Whitney said. "I want to change the narrative starting right now." The performance that followed shocked the music industry forever. When Madonna returned to the stage for what the audience thought would be a standard encore, she was accompanied by Whitney Houston, who had borrowed a simple black dress from Madonna's wardrobe team to complement the staging. The sight of the two women together caused an eruption of surprise and excitement that seemed to shake the foundations of Madison Square Garden. "Ladies and gentlemen," Madonna announced to the crowd, "I want to share this stage with someone who reminds me why I love music, why I love performing, and why women in this industry need to support each other. Please welcome the incredible Whitney Houston." The crowd's reaction was unlike anything either woman had experienced. This wasn't just applause, it was recognition of a historic moment. People were witnessing the end of a manufactured rivalry and the beginning of a new model for how successful women could relate to each other in the entertainment industry. Whitney approached the microphone with the same grace she brought to every performance. But there was something extra in her demeanor, a sense of purpose that went beyond entertainment. "I came here tonight to hear one of the most fearless artists of our generation," she said, her voice carrying clearly through the arena's sound system. "And I wanted all of you to know that there's room in this industry for all of us to be successful, to be different, and to support each other." The two women performed an impromptu medley that combined elements of Like a Prayer with Whitney's Greatest Love of All, two songs about spiritual connection and self-empowerment that created an unexpectedly powerful message about unity and strength. Whitney's soaring vocals combined with Madonna's passionate delivery created something that neither could have achieved alone. What you're seeing now is nothing compared to the emotional climax. The performance reached its emotional peak when they created an unrehearsed harmony on the final chorus of Greatest Love of All. Madonna, who was not known for her vocal range, found herself inspired by Whitney's technique and power, while Whitney discovered new emotional depths in her own familiar song when combined with Madonna's theatrical intensity. But the most powerful moment came not during the singing, but during the silence that followed. After the final notes faded, Whitney and Madonna stood together on the Madison Square Garden stage, holding hands and looking out at an audience that was witnessing history. The applause continued for nearly 5 minutes, but it wasn't just appreciation for the performance. It was recognition of a moment that had changed something fundamental about how the music industry worked. When they finally left the stage together, both women knew that they had accomplished something more important than any individual career achievement. They had used their platforms to model a different way for women to relate to each other in a competitive industry. The final twist will leave you speechless. In the weeks following the Madison Square Garden collaboration, Whitney received hundreds of letters from young women who had witnessed the performance either in person or through the extensive media coverage that followed. Many of these letters shared a similar theme. Seeing Whitney and Madonna support each other had given them permission to support other women in their own lives and careers. One letter particularly moved Whitney. It was from a 17-year-old aspiring singer named Alicia, who had been watching the supposed Whitney-Madonna rivalry and feeling confused about whether she could admire both women's different approaches to music and image. "Dear Whitney," the letter read, "seeing you and Madonna together made me realize that I don't have to choose between being like you or being like her. I can be like me and still support other women who are different from me. Thank you for showing me that being America's sweetheart doesn't mean you can't also be brave." Whitney kept that letter in her dressing room for years as a reminder of why she had made the decision to attend Madonna's concert and why the risk had been worth taking. The Madison Square Garden collaboration also permanently changed Whitney's relationship with her own image and career choices. Having taken such a public stand for artistic freedom and female solidarity, she felt empowered to be more vocal about other industry issues that mattered to her. But perhaps the most beautiful part of this story? When Whitney died tragically in 2012, Madonna was among the first artists to pay tribute, and her statement referenced that night at Madison Square Garden 20 years earlier. "Whitney Houston taught me that true strength comes not from competing with other women, but from lifting them up," Madonna wrote. "Our night together at Madison Square Garden wasn't just a performance. It was Whitney showing me and the world what real leadership looks like. She didn't have to take that risk for me, but she did, and it changed how I thought about success and sisterhood for the rest of my career." Madonna also revealed that she had kept Whitney's white rose pressed in a frame in her home studio, along with a note Whitney had written that night. "To Madonna, thank you for showing the world that women can be powerful in so many different ways. Here's to breaking down walls instead of building them up." Love, Whitney. The story of Whitney's decision to attend Madonna's concert became a template for how artists could handle media-manufactured rivalries. When journalists tried to create tension between other successful female artists, many would reference the Whitney-Madonna collaboration as an example of how to respond with grace and sisterhood instead of competition and conflict. Music journalists began using the phrase Whitney Houston moment to describe instances when successful women chose to support each other publicly instead of feeding into competitive narratives. The legacy that continues today. Today, the Madison Square Garden performance is studied in music business courses as an example of how artists can take control of media narratives and use their platforms for positive social change. Whitney's decision to risk her America's sweetheart image to support Madonna's artistic freedom is seen as one of the most important moments in the evolution of how female artists relate to each other publicly. Every February 14th, Madison Square Garden honors the anniversary of the Whitney-Madonna collaboration with a moment of silence before the first event of the evening, regardless of what type of performance is scheduled. The arena's management considers it one of the most important nights in the venue's history. The concert where Whitney Houston made the shocking decision to support Madonna proved that sometimes the most powerful moments in entertainment happen when artists choose courage over comfort and sisterhood over safety. Whitney's willingness to risk her carefully cultivated image to support another woman's artistic freedom created a legacy that continues to inspire female artists and leaders in every industry. Sometimes the most memorable moments in entertainment history aren't about perfect performances or flawless execution. They're about perfect timing, perfect courage, and perfect understanding of what's more important than individual success. Whitney Houston's decision to walk into Madison Square Garden unannounced and show the world what female solidarity looked like proved that America's sweetheart could also be America's leader. If this incredible story of courage meeting compassion moved you, make sure to subscribe and hit that thumbs up button. Share this video with someone who understands that supporting other women's success doesn't diminish your own achievements. Have you ever taken a risk to support someone else's dream? Let us know in the comments below. And don't forget to ring that notification bell for more amazing true stories about the moments when music history was made through unexpected courage and the power of choosing sisterhood over manufactured competition.